welcome to this month's Side Alpha Leadership. I'm your host, David Polikoff. I am pleased and honored to have Chief John Norman with me on this month's show. So I'm not going to go on. John, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and so everybody kind of knows. I know everybody knows who you are if it's in our realm, what we just talked about offline. But go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people who you are.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me, Dave. As you mentioned, my name is John Norman. I am a retired Deputy Assistant Chief with the New York City Fire Department. I started as a firefighter in June of 1970 as a volunteer in my hometown on Long Island. I spent 27 years there with the Inwood Fire Department. I moved out of town about almost 30 years ago. So after that, I went to Oklahoma State University out in Stillwater, and I was a firefighter, part paid, and a student firefighter with the Stillwater Fire Department for almost 3 years. And then I came back to New York City, worked as a fire protection engineer before I got hired with the New York City Fire Department. So I went through the ranks there and retired almost 18 years ago. At the time, I was the chief in charge of special operations. So it's been a long, long ride, watching the progression of the fire service. And it's been a great ride. I'm fortunate that I have the opportunity to partake in it still. I do a lot of teaching. And as we talked before the show, writing, I've written, a number of books. And now I live vicariously. I have two sons on the FDNY, so they come home and tell me everything that I'm supposed to know. But it's been a blessing.
Is it one of the stories where they'll say like, oh, so and so got in trouble for doing this, and you kind of laugh and say, man, you wouldn't believe the stuff that we did that you would get fired for today?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Times have changed, and those who fail to recognize it are going to get themselves jammed up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we used to be able to do things that you can't do today. So
yeah, and you hear, it's funny because I've talked to some younger guys, and they've heard the story. They want to try to recreate what it was back in the day, and I'm like, what happened back in the day, we didn't have cell phones, or we had cameras, but you had to go get that developed, so nothing was instant, where everybody could see. And by the time you got the pictures developed, it was kind of forgotten about. But I tell people, I said, learn from what we did, and then expand upon it, but don't do the things that we did that, like you said, get you jammed up.
right. I had a great mentor, a fellow named John Ball. John was a legendary FDNY firefighter, ended up retiring as a captain. And I was a probie when John was a captain. We both worked in Brooklyn, and one day he asked me for a ride to work. His car was broken. So I was going in, and on the way in, he was telling me about how he was kind of disgusted with the job, how it had changed in the nearly 30 years that he had been a firefighter. And I'm like, what do you mean this sucks? This is the greatest thing since sliced bread to me, because I had never experienced those past situations. And again, you can't try to recreate that for yourself. You have to live in the moment you're in. So that was, I say, it was an enlightening experience to me, that a guy like him who loved the job, who was so loved by the job, was now coming to the end of his career, and it wasn't the same as it was before. So just live in what you are dealt with today.
Yeah, and the fire service does change. The old saying, the two things firemen hate are change and the way things are. But it does change, and as you move forward in your career, you have to adapt with it. You have to change some of the things that when my grandfather, were working in the fire department, the gear has changed. The SCBA came about. They didn't have it. Hoses change, nozzles change. So, and the way that we approach the job is the historical part of it is still the same of how we, put water on fire and search and rescue and throw ladders and things like that. But the technology changes, and some of the strategies and the tactics change, and the people have changed. So you kind of have to adapt with the different personalities and nationalities and races and creeds and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you said it, right in the very beginning of this conversation. This is the best job in the world, hands down, and I could never imagine doing anything else. And you get like-minded people with that type A personality that feel the same way, and it doesn't feel like you're at work. It is your second family.
Absolutely. I have a saying, when I went into work, it was going to a sleepover with five of my best friends. So,
That's
yeah.
that's an awesome way to look at it, and you're right because I remember when I first got hired. I got hired when I was 18, so I was literally the kid on the shift, surrounded by Vietnam veterans, and I was pure entertainment for them, as a young kid. But it was like you're going home, going over to your friend's house, five of your friends, 10 of your friends, whatever, in the firehouse having a sleep. We didn't really sleep because running calls all night long, but wouldn't have changed it for the world. So talking a little bit about the fire service and things that even though things change, there are things that stay the same. And one of the things we had talked about online, we talk about size up. It's promotional season. A lot of guys are trying to break out of the firefighter realm, moving into the lieutenants, sergeants, lieutenants, captains. But size up is a big part of what we do, regardless of the type of call, whether it's an ambulance call all the way up to a high rise fire, or even in the special operations world. And I've always said it's the responsibility of everybody on the rig to be doing a size up. So, what advice would you give to firefighters that are just starting the job? And maybe they've been told for their 28-week recruit class, hey, mouth shut, ears open, but they still have a voice and the things that they should be looking for when they're running calls and how they can learn from that.
As you said, it's everybody's responsibility. I mean, the IC and even the company officer can't be every place at once. And in order to keep that current picture of what's going on, they depend on everybody, reporting to them. They have to know what's important and know how to report it. But if you see something, say something. I mean, that's, the slogan we use in terrorism and all that. Can't tell you how many times people have said, "Gee, Chief, I don't know about," and that's all it took was, "If you don't know about it, got my attention." And okay, if the hair on the back of your neck stands up, react. Let people know about it. So that's that's as you said, the most junior firefighter right up through the incident commander has to have that same level of input and understanding that it's their responsibility. Again, the more senior you are, the more critical that becomes. But without the input from all sides, all areas, uh, you're working with a blank slate. So yeah, size up. It's the ongoing process. A a boss may have been through that area 3 minutes ago, but 3 minutes later, conditions have changed. But they're still thinking that it is what they saw. So everybody has to be on that same page. That particularly changing or worsening conditions. I mean, you got to let people know about that.
I
Yeah.
I find I try to tell the newer, when they would come out of recruit class and we get them in the station, and I tell them, I said, look, if we're a 3-man engine company, um, that's our minimum staffing, and I'm relying on, everybody. I'm relying on everybody to get their eyes on what's going on. I'm human. I may be the captain, but I may miss something. So, I tell them, I said, you can ask a question while you are flaking the line out or things like that. You just need to know how to, ask that question to be, hey, Cap, did you see, we rolled up, we had smoke. I got fire coming out. I saw fire on the Delta side as we were coming out on the second floor. Something like that, where we're thinking, well, maybe we thought we had a basement fire, but now I got fire coming out on the second floor. I might have to relay that to the chief. Maybe I'm going to need to get a couple more crews in here. But they have a voice, and yes, you have two ears, one mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you talk. But um, on an emergency incident, just throwing it out there real quick. Hey, Chief, I saw that. Or hey, Cap, I saw that. Um, and I think that that allows when the captain accepts that, so yeah, I saw that too. Good eye, or hey, good thing like that. That's gonna empower that rookie to know that he can talk to his officer, and that officer is going to start gaining respect right away. So everybody's got
And
to
the
be.
opposite is true. Officers have to make sure that they don't stifle their people that way. Again, if a guy is, going on and giving a, 30-minute dissertation on what he sees over the radio, all right, we can't have that. But, you, if a guy calls something out and you already did see it, don't hammer him over it. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. I did see that, you know.
Even that little bit of praise right away is like, hey, good eye, Rook. I saw that too. That's good. Good keeping your eyes open for that. Let's go in and do whatever.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give to these new officers? I've got buddies of mine that actually live in my neighborhood that are just finished taking the lieutenant's test in the department, and I'm trying to sit down with them and go over assessment centers and things to think about with size up, and the biggest things, slow down, pay attention to what the scenario is, make sure you read everything. But once they get out in the real world, what kind of advice would you give a new officer when it comes to size up, riding that engine company? Maybe the first time they're going down the road and it's a working fire, it's the first one they've ever been in charge of and actually have the radio in the hand.
Yeah, I remember that quite well. It is a daunting task. You're not going to see everything at once, but concentrate on the basics. Life hazard, threats to exposures. Start solving problems one step at a time, and you know, understand it is an evolving incident. You can't say, okay, I saw this, I did my loop, and I know what I'm dealing with. No, you don't. It's changing second by second as we evolve. So uh, just keep aware that things are happening around you. You're going to base your size up on what you saw initially, and then keep asking or looking for more information as we gather and as we do things. Conditions are going to change. So you can feel, you can hear, you can see conditions as they change around you. Is it feeling better? Is it getting hotter? Is the smoke condition lifting or is it getting darker? So you got to constantly be uh, assessing each of those inputs from all around you. Sound, uh, everything is it's a very daunting task. It can often be overwhelming with so many inputs coming at you, but you have to focus on your initial information and then how it changes from there.
No, when I was a new officer, um, I was fortunate. I came from the volunteer ranks, so I got to ride the fire engine a lot. I was around a firehouse my whole life, um, but but just something about when you, and especially in our county, when I was coming up through the ranks, we didn't have officer candidate school. It was like you're a firefighter. Fortunate enough, I was a technician for a few years, so I was driving the apparatus, and I had a good seasoned officer with me, and we fed off of each other, and I learned from him. But now you can get promoted so fast, you could actually go through the ranks and never have been in first due on a working fire, getting promoted to lieutenant. Now you're riding the front seat, and all eyes are on you for the most part, or all ears are on you, what you're getting ready to say on the radio. And like you said, you got to constantly be assessing what's going on as you're approaching the block. I tell all these new officers, hey, tell your driver when you enter the block, whether you're on a ladder truck or you're on an engine company, slow down a little bit. See if you can get a good look at all the sides of the building. Pull past if you're on an engine company so you can leave room for the truck. At least that way, maybe you're getting a look at three sides and see what the conditions are. And then I would tell people, I said, before you key that microphone up, take a deep breath, let it out, take another deep breath, let it out, then give your on scene report. And I said, the more calm you sound, and as corny as it sounds, the smoother that fire ground's going to go. You grab that radio and you start yelling and carrying on and saying all kinds of different stuff. Everybody else is getting amped up and it sounds like it's out of control. But as that officer, you're setting that tone. You got to, and I've told people that first due engine company officer has a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things on their head. Not only are they got to get it right in the map, they got to be reading their mobile data computers. We've got all that information coming up, making sure you're getting there right, calling your water supply, getting that established, moving into the block, giving that on scene report, doing the 360, and then you're going to probably have to take that initial command until the boss gets on the scene. So there's a lot of moving parts that first officer has. And I think in the fire service, some of the bigger cities, some of the bigger organizations, they do have the officer candidate school where they may have the funds to do that. But some of the smaller counties and towns, they just don't have the finance to put 4 or 5 officers on a day work position and backfill them with overtime where you're trying to teach them how to be officers. So a lot of it's on the job, which is where, things like your books and things like that, where we can read. You can't get everything from a book or from YouTube or magazines, but it at least starts getting your wheels spinning a little bit, and then want to go out and maybe, oh, this is what they talked about in the book. This is what I read. This is what I saw in the video. Now it's starting to make a little more sense. Kitchen table talks. I was talking with a friend of mine, Shelly Wheeler, who's works over in Montgomery County. I said, if an older guy, a retired old guy, comes in for a cup of coffee and he sits down and starts telling stories, shut your mouth and listen to what the guy has to say, because he's got a lot of knowledge and wisdom that he's getting ready to drop on you, and you can pick things up from that. So I want to talk a little bit about the kitchen table. It's always the great equalizer, but what kind of good conversations have you had, and what have you learned from, not only from your new guys, but what kind of stuff are you learning and you're passing on as you move forward in your career still?
You ought to be learning something new each and every day. I don't care how long you've been doing it. I mean, there's still an awful lot to learn. And if I feel I'm a failure if I don't learn something new every day. So, yeah, the kitchen table, like you say, I mean, that is probably, it's like the placental membrane. It's where all the information passes from one person to the next. And use it, use it. As an officer, don't be sitting up in the office. You got to do your paperwork and all that, but spend as much time as you can with the troops, both passing and receiving information. I mean, the informal setting, you're going to do the formal drills and training sessions, but just sitting there, like you say, telling stories. I mean, one feeds off the other. As soon as somebody mentions a situation, you say, man, I had one almost like that. And this is what happened here. That is invaluable knowledge. Now, as you mentioned, whether it's the table talks, whether it's the book reading, the YouTube videos, you absorb a certain percentage of that, and it goes in upstairs there. But until you actually have the opportunity to apply it, to actually do it, it doesn't really sink in. Doesn't make complete sense. So you got to keep working at it, taking in as many bits and pieces of information, and then looking for the opportunities to go out and apply those things that you heard about or saw, and do it. And after you've done it a couple of times, now you can say, okay, yeah, now I know what they're talking about. Until then, it's an abstract concept to most of us. I mean, I don't know who said it, but the human brain only absorbs something like 10% of new material. You can read something and you're not absorbing but a small fraction of that material. I remember the first time I was studying for promotion and I read Chief Dunn's book. Now I had read it, and this is important. This is really important stuff. Okay, I'm studying for promotion out of it. I take my highlighter to it, and I was doing a 6 week study cycle. Every 6 weeks, I'd come back and redo the whole thing. So 6 weeks after I read this material, I highlighted this material, made a note next to it saying, this is important. I came back and I'm reading through the book, and I get to that same chapter, and it's like, I don't remember reading this. I know that I read it. I know I said it was important because I highlighted it, but I didn't remember reading it because I hadn't had an opportunity. I didn't see anything like that building that he had been talking about in my district. So I had never actually saw what he was talking about. It was still that abstract concept. But when conditions do pop up where you finally do run into that situation, if you read about it before, now the light bulb goes on. It's like, oh, that's what they're talking about. And you'll be amazed how much of it you recall and you'll be able to implement. Now, if you have never studied that, you're not going to understand what's happening at all. And you may get blindsided by, events that occur because you just didn't know what was going to happen. So it is an ever uh, not change. It's an ever evolving state of knowledge that we deal with. I mean, you can be the greatest, officer in the world in one subject. The fire service is so broad that you can't know everything. So always accept that you're still learning each and every day. And those who don't, man, they're setting themselves up for a, big, big surprise.
Yeah, I like what you said that come to work. It doesn't matter how much time you got on the job. It doesn't matter what your rank is. Come to work to learn something new every day,
Yeah,
and you'd be surprised where you can learn new stuff. I've said the new people that we're bringing in are some of the smartest people that you would ever want to meet. Even if they're 18 or 19 years old, the things that they have at their fingertips were things that you and I never had. We
right,
didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have Google or YouTube or anything like that. These people know how to find that information,
right,
you know, digest it, and then they can, like you said, then they see it and go, oh, okay, that's what that means, and they can move forward. That they're fast, they're smart. So I tell people, don't ever turn your shoulder on the new people, because you might learn something from them, things that they've seen, things that they're teaching at the training academy now versus
right.
what we learn at the training academy. Is it's ever changing, it's ever evolving. So come to work, try to find something new to learn every day. One of the things you talked about is you could read something or you could see the video. What I like is I've had guys, when I was a captain, they'd come and say, hey Cap, I saw this video of this hose load. This company was loading the hose this way, and it looked like it played out pretty fast. Can we go out on the air? We want to try it out. I'm like, absolutely. you know, Pull the lines off, repack it how they saw it, and then we'd see, hey, is that going to work in our district? Is a variation of that might work in our district? Maybe this won't, but if we modify it a little bit, or you know what, it looked great on the video, it works for that crew. They got wide open areas with no cars on the side of the road. It's not going to work for us. But at least it got them out, getting their hands on the tools, trying something new with it instead of just keeping the same old, same old. Um, and they processed that, and allows them to go back and look for more things that we can do. I mean, we've learned a ton of stuff, just with the FDNY's Forcible Entry Manual, and a lot of the stuff in that manual has not changed because locks and things like that haven't really changed. But we still use that in our training company. We've downloaded that. We have it on our website that people can go and look at it, because a lot of those locks, in the cities and in the older suburbs, still seeing them.
Yeah.
So being able to read about it and see it, and then actually go out and look at it and go, oh, here it is, put my hands on it. It makes a lot of sense. So yeah, you can learn a little bit from reading and a little bit from watching videos and talking and things like that, but to actually go out and do it, because firefighters are doers. We got to go out, we got to put our hands on it, we got to see how things work, kick tires, and then move forward from there.
Well, so much of it is manual skills. I mean, you have to develop that muscle memory so that when you can't see, you can do it blindfolded. We have to operate that way. And the only way to get that skill is by doing it over and over again. So, no
And
doubt.
repetition, that a lot of the fire service is repetition, learning your knots and things like that, to the point where you can just be talking to somebody while you're doing whatever. It's like tying your shoes. So finishing up the size, I want to talk a little bit about chief officers, battalion chiefs, and the senior officers that are coming in. What are they looking for? And what, in you're looking at the more of the 10,000 foot level when you're coming in and seeing what all the crews are doing. What's the building doing? What kind of information are you trying to get from your people? And then where do we go from there as an incident commander?
Well, again, in our department in the FDNY, the different levels of chief officer. I mean, as a battalion chief, you were still focused on those initial companies. They weren't at that 10,000 foot level. They were more at the, maybe 200 foot level. Okay, getting an overview, uh, you know, knowing where all the chess pieces are going to be located and making sure that they've got all the things that they need to do. Uh, then we have a deputy chief come in. He's going to go to the 2,000 foot level. And now he's got more time, more information. Events have evolved since the first units have started doing things. And he's going to make an adjustment or not based on what he or she sees. And then finally, if it gets to the stage where none of that is working well, that's when the staff chief arrives. And usually, uh, they don't really have all that much impact. That first battalion chief and then the deputy chief, they have a lot more impact than the later arriving chief officers most of the time. Again, having you're arriving early in the incident, you're seeing conditions as they began at their worst normally. When you get there, as a staff chief, I mean, coming from headquarters, it might be an hour drive to certain parts of the city.
Mm.
If that fire has been evolving for an hour, you have no idea what has transpired other than what you've heard over the radio. Uh, that puts you at a big disadvantage. So those first chief officers, they're in a much better position to say, okay, this is what I think is happening. This is what we're going to do about it, and then see how it changes, how it reacts to what you've done. And if not, say, oh, this is getting worse. Okay. I had had an interesting situation one night. I was on my way home from work, actually. I wasn't even officially on duty. I had just left headquarters driving through, and now another staff chief had the night duty. So I'm coming through Brooklyn, and a company gives a second alarm on my way home. It's on my way home. And the on duty staff chief, he's coming from Manhattan. He's 40 minutes away. So I put over the radio, I'm going to take this in. I arrived there. And when I get there, I've got fire in, I think it was 10 out of the 14 attached row frame dwellings, with firemen jumping out of windows or bailing out onto ladders in like 5 or 6 of them. I'm like, oh, this is not good. Transmit the third alarm, transmit the fourth alarm at the same time, which is unusual. We get a lot of resources come in pretty quickly, and they do a bang up job. Absolutely great job. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody, the civilians are all evacuated. Stop fire extension pretty well where it was. And then the chief of operations, or maybe it was the chief of department at the time, gets there. And again, he's late in the incident. He comes to me, John, a fourth alarm? I said, Sal, you should have been here about half an hour ago. It looked a whole lot different. So having that early perspective of what conditions look like, you're going to recognize changing conditions. Again, when you get there later in the incident, it's much harder to realize how conditions have changed. So,
I always liked, when I became a battalion chief, they did give us 5 days worth of training, of incident command training and things like that. But what I really liked, I loved watching my guys work, because the passion. The battalion that I was in was notorious for, those guys wanted to be there. It was the battalion you either wanted to be there or you hated to be there. And the guys that wanted to be there, when they get promoted and they get transferred out, they work their entire career to come back. but watching those guys work, and they would be so down on themselves if they didn't do something right or if they made a mistake. It was always when I rolled up on the scene, and usually I was 10, 15 minutes behind the first two company in the battalion, depending on where it is. Um, I would roll up and it would be just like, I'd have to call up, just, hey, give me a can report real quick, and then take it from there, and really didn't have to say much on the radio, which I really appreciated because I'm not a big fan of talking on the radio. But just to get, they knew that as long as you provide me information, I'll let you keep working, as long as it's factual information. And it was interesting just to watch it. Just, it made me look good because they made me look good. And you'd have the bosses come up and say, hey, you really ran a good fire. And I say, in all honesty, I was just a placeholder. Those guys, did the work. They fed me the information that I needed, and the fire went out. And I truly enjoyed my time as a battalion chief, and decided not to promote any further before I retired. One of the things that you said about making a difference, that first chief getting on the scene, the battalion chief getting on the scene, he's working with his guys. They do make a difference. And when the senior chiefs start to show up, they're going to take some of the other stuff, like, where you're going to relocate the occupants, get Red Cross here, or whatever it is that you got to do. In my role now, in my new position in Frederick County, I'm part of the senior staff. I'll come in, and a lot of times you've already got two battalion chiefs and maybe another assistant chief on the scene or a deputy. I'll just call them on the phone and said, hey, how about if I go run a battalion and you guys continue to work on the fire? And they're like, would you do that? I'm like, oh, hell yes, I'll do that. Because I'm
Oh,
not going to make a
yes.
difference. I'm just going to end up in another white shirt on the scene. I'll go run the battalion. And man, I was happy doing that.
Yeah.
Um, what did you like? Did you like being a battalion chief? Leaving the role as a captain.
Every step was a change. It was a challenge, and you regret leaving the people that you've been working with every step of the way. Uh, I got to be a battalion chief in an absolutely spectacular battalion. I had 6 great companies, and I had made up my mind that I was not going to go any further. I was going to stay at it about another uh, 12 to 13 years left before I would be mandatory retired. And I just said, I'm going to stay as a battalion chief here in the 16th Battalion. It was just a great place. But then, September 11th happened, and that decision was taken away from me. So uh, I loved every rank I was in at the time. Staff is a big, big change. I mean, I was doing everybody calls it the 9 to 5. It was at that point, it was the 7 in the morning till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, uh, because we were, trying to recover from the losses of September 11th. But and then responding to, larger events, third alarms or greater, or technical rescue events, off duty. So that was a big challenge as well. It wasn't as much fun as being a battalion chief by any means, but it certainly was something that was absolutely necessary to do. At that point, everybody just said yes, sir, and stepped up and did what was asked. So, like I said, I love being a battalion chief because you're still getting there early in the incident. Especially in the 16th Battalion. I was responding with one of my houses, an engine and a truck. I had 3 engines and 3 trucks, and I was no more than 5 or 10 minutes from the first 2 engine. No matter where we went, I was part of being right there behind them, seeing what was going on. And the best part was being second duty chief, where you got interior operations, and I was often between the 11th and 12th battalions or the 13th battalion. I was the all hands chief to many of those, and they were doing a good bit of work themselves. So it was a great spot.
That was when we ended up going into the command team concept, we didn't have aides, we didn't have drivers, so we were kind of driving ourselves. But we were driving ourselves. But we would have two battalion chiefs on every full assignment, whether a house fire, building, or high rise. Um, and what the chief wanted was that second due chief get on the scene, do a quick 360 if it's possible, at least get us get a look at the Charlie side, come back, get in the vehicle, and either take your tactical worksheet or take over the radio, whatever it is that you wanted them to do. But we were so tight in our battalions, and we work in a combination system, so we have volunteers as well. And I was really tight with a lot of the volunteer chief officers, those guys that ran up and down in that battalion. Again, you either hated it there or you loved it there, and it was always a race to get there because that chief would get on the scene and say, "Hey, Battalion One's pulling in right now. He's going to have command. I'm going to go ahead and take Division Two," and he would go inside. So it was always a foot race to get there to see who could go inside first. And then we'd have to fill out our command team with the next chief that came in or whatever. But that taking that forward position, um, I felt guilty because I would have to give that division to the first due engine company. And in a house you may be able to do that, but like in a garden apartment or even a high rise, how can that guy be responsible for an entire floor? You can't
Yeah,
see what's going on in the other apartments. So I felt guilty, and I always wanted that second chief on a garden apartment or a high rise. Hey, go take that forward position, take over as that division supervisor, and then you allow that engine company to go to work and be responsible for his people. And,
right.
and
Yeah, now the forward deployment of chief officers, I think, is critical to firefighter safety. I mean, let's face it, they can't be in more than one place at a time. I mean, that engine officer has to be moving the hose line towards the seat of the fire. There's an awful lot of other spaces that have to be examined, looking at conditions. Are they, getting worse? Are they making progress? My responsibility as chief officer, I always, especially as that interior attack chief, was to be the guy holding the leash on the engine officer. Okay, keep going. They're the pit bull. You want them to be the pit bull charging forward. My job was to pull them back out of harm's way when things start to look bad and make sure that they're not getting themselves in too deep or into too much trouble. So, as multiple times we've seen it where, chief officers delayed, or maybe in our case, we had several tragedies where we had acting battalion chiefs and they didn't have the experience, they didn't have that command presence to realize what their role was. In many cases, I thought it came down to the fact that they were company officers and they were still doing company officer things. They weren't doing chief officer things. They weren't looking at the overall picture. And again, taking that responsibility to coordinate all those different roles and pulling people out of harm's way or pushing them forward in different areas. And unfortunately, that had, again, we had several tragedies where that undoubtedly played a role. So,
that and we have our bump ups or our captains that are on the list to become battalion chiefs. I think it's important that the captains and the firefighters understand that when that chief officer comes in that forward position, he's not there to take the joy away from what you're doing, but he's there to make sure that you're gonna go home. Hey, I might need to steer another company over to this apartment next door. I might need that company, instead of backing you up, I need them on the floor above on the garden apartment because it's running into the cock loft or whatever. But that first due engine officer, if I make him that division supervisor, he's not going to see that.
yeah,
And we're playing Russian roulette at that point, hoping that the fire is only right where they are and it didn't go anywhere else. But like you said, being able to just kind of have that eyes to be able to look on that plane of the exposure apartments, the floor above. Is there any drop down on the floor below? You can move back and forth while those companies are working
yeah,
and be able to pull them back right away, saying, "Hey, we're not hitting this," or "Hey, I need you here instead." It that's you can't put a value on that, and it's that comes with experience. Even the new battalion chief isn't going to understand that.
No,
But as you gain that experience, you will, and that's where I think it's our responsibility as chief officers when we become seasoned chief officers, and you're talking to the captains that are looking to take the test. Hey, there's a lot of things that you need to think about. You're not just responsible for you and your two other guys. You're now responsible for a box alarm full of people, maybe 30 or 40 dudes. Um, when we're inside of this fire. So I'm going to ask you a lot of stuff on the radio because I want that feedback until I can get somebody in there to help you, or at least be your second set of eyes.
yeah, no, that, it works so well that way. And I get it. A lot of places don't have that. They just can't put the people on scene. But then they got to recognize that they're at a huge, huge disadvantage. They got to behave a little more cautiously. I mean, again, I worked in a department that, they had one chief officer on duty and covered a huge, huge city. I mean, it would take them 15 minutes to get from the station to some of their responses very easily, if they weren't doing something else, if they weren't out at the other end of the city. And there was no second chief coming. So that was a tough position to be in.
You were fortunate that you're resource heavy in New York,
Oh,
and in the Mid Atlantic area. I'll be the first to admit we're pretty resource heavy when it comes to apparatus and firefighters and things like that. Our mutual aid agreements, with the surrounding counties, we can get apparatus pretty quick. But there's some rural companies out there that you may only have 2 or 3 engines, and that's it. And your mutual aid might be coming from an hour away, and like you said, one chief to patrol an entire district or entire department.
county.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, or county. How you know you still got to make it work, and that's where I think it's important that what can we do to make it work? How can we make it easier for ourselves? How can we make it a little safer for ourselves? You're never going to take the risk out of the job, but how can we make it so we have a better chance of success with the limited staffing that we have? Hey, maybe our box alarm needs to go from 3 engine companies to 6,
yeah,
because it's going to take that sixth engine company 15, 20 minutes to get there. But I've got manpower coming, as opposed to we got 3. Oh, I need 3 more companies. Now it's 20 minutes down the road.
right. By the time they get there, you needed 6 more companies.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate. You were very fortunate. Obviously, you're resource heavy there in New York. We have the resources in the Mid Atlantic area, the Northeast, for the most part. With even the little cities as you move up through Connecticut and whatnot, they have the manpower. But when you get out west, man, as you know, it's
Ah,
wide open. And you know, I think we talk about learning and training, FDIC and, the Firehouse Expo that you talk about. I think it's critical that these guys get out there and talk to some of these companies that are resource heavy. And then these resource heavy chiefs talk to some of the companies that are a little thin. And you'd be surprised at what a little collaboration can come up with, and how you work things out. And I think that, you know, being able to go out to FDIC and do that networking and talking to people, especially if you're a new officer and you're like, hey, I'm having this issue, and you can say, oh yeah, we did that 15 years ago. This is how we solved it, and it maybe that the way they solved it wouldn't work 100% for you, but it might get you 80% there, and then you
yeah.
figure out the rest of it.
Take 2 things from this guy and one thing from another guy, and all of a sudden you have a plan. I have an interesting story. I have a house up in the Adirondack Mountains. It's very, very rural area, and it's surrounded. Well, there's a large, large lake that the community is built around. There's no, I mean, it's an hour and a half drive around the lake. You got one way in, one way out. So the communities there are really, really struggling for membership. In the daytime, this summer I was listening. Well, not even, I was in my yard and I hear the siren blow, And 2 minutes later, it blows again. So I turn the radio on and start listening, and they're blowing for a house fire up the road from me. So, all right, I'm going to stay out of the way. I mean, you can't, if you get on that road, you're going to get blocked in by responding apparatus. I mean, you don't want to create, problems. So I'm waiting and waiting, and they blow a third time. And okay, they're listening for somebody to acknowledge their response, and nobody's responding. So finally, after like 10 minutes, nobody goes by my house. They have to go by my house to get to this call. So finally, I said, I'm going. I jump in a car, drive up there, and it's food on the stove. Okay. Nobody shows up. Nobody shows up. I tell the lady, okay, listen, it's out. I checked. There's no extension, vented the smoke, and nobody shows up. If there had been a real fire, this house was going to burn to the ground. Finally, as I'm leaving, which has to be 20 minutes into it, one guy in a car pulls up and he sees me coming out. And I tell him, okay, it's food on the stove, it's out. And he's like, who are you? I says, I'm just a guy, I'm, retired fireman. He's okay, I got a radio, I'll put it out because they have mutual aid departments coming. So thankfully, they did automatic aid, but everybody's in the same boat there. There's nobody getting off the floor in the middle of the daytime. And, it's a terrible, terrible position if you're a homeowner. But that's so much of what rural America is all about. It's what they're facing.
We're finding where I work in Frederick now. I'm in volunteer services. I'm a career firefighter, different divisions. I'm in volunteer services, so I'm there to make sure that they get the training that they need. We have a recruiter that's in our office and things like that. But what we're finding is that you get people that really want to volunteer, and they want to serve their community, the whole, this is why I want to do this and all that stuff, or I just want to run into burning buildings or whatever. And when they find out that it's a year and a half worth of training before you actually count as staffing, that's a turnoff for a lot of
Yeah.
people because they think, oh, well, I'm going to show up. They're going to give me some gear. They're going to teach me how to pull some hose, roll some hose, squirt some water, and then we're going to go down the road on lights and siren. And it's like, well, you need to get your orientation, your fire one, your hazmat operations, maybe EMT or EMR or whatever. It's a year and a half if you bust your ass.
Yeah.
About 2 years just to become staffing, and that throws a lot of people. And I've had on this podcast before, I've said it several times, we as the fire service instructors, as we need to start challenging our state academies that you need to figure out a better way to deliver your product. This whole, you got to get in your car, drive 30 minutes down the road to the training academy, sit in a classroom for 3 hours while a dude files through from PowerPoints, and then you go home. I could have done that at home on my computer with remote learning. We did it for COVID. I mean, you can get your college degree from Columbia Southern University on the computer. Why can't we do these, the PowerPoints, and then bring people in on Saturdays and Sundays to do the practical stuff?
Of course
I
we
think
could.
we'll be able to retain more people.
Of course you could. Yeah. I mean, it's a critical issue. Retention and recruitment for volunteer department is just terrible.
We're finding, in my volunteer department, in my community, we'll bring in 5 members, a month for our meeting, which is great.
Wow.
But it's keeping them.
That's huge.
That's the problem, is keeping them. Out of the 5, we might keep 1, for over a year to get their training and things like that. And I honestly think, when we have exit interviews, we get them on the phone. Hey, you don't come around anymore. What's going on? Oh, I just don't have the time anymore. That's what it always comes down to. I don't have the time. I thought I was going to be able to do this. And then it ends up that's not what it ended up being. It's the training, going to fire one's 120 hours, EMT's 209 hours, that's 6 months, 3 and 6 months alone, just for those 2 core classes, not to mention hazmat operations, which is another 60 some hours. We need to figure out as a fire service a better way to deliver our product, but still giving them the information that they need. You're never going to get away from that from recruit classes as career people. You're getting a paycheck to go to your training academy and you're there for your 28 weeks. But for volunteers, there are some classes like fire officer one, instructor one. There are some things we can do in our dens while we're looking at the computer, remote learning. My kids had to do it for 4 months during COVID. Some people had to do it for a year during COVID. Was it the best thing? No, but we could refine that. And I think you would find that we would retain more people. Um, I don't know if you're still keeping tabs on what's going on in New York. What we're finding in the Mid Atlantic is for career side, our numbers are down trying to recruit people to come in to do to take the job. We used to have a test once a year, and you get about 3 or 4 thousand people. Now we're lucky if we get 800. So I don't know if the numbers are down in New York or not.
I don't know for sure. Uh, I'm told, I believe that they are, but not that dramatically as far as I know. But yeah, you know, uh, we used to do the same thing, 30,000 people. We only tested every 4 years. But now I'm told that, yeah, it's, in the 8,000, 9,000 range. So,
Wow, that's huge. And we're finding, even in Frederick, we're doing we're trying to do 2 recruit classes a year, and out of those recruit classes, those are 50 students. So we break them up 25 and 25. So 25 will go through fire school while the other 25 go through EMT, and they flip flop. And then when they're done, we're bringing in another 50. And that's just to try to break even from the retirees and the people that leave to go to other jurisdictions or whatever. The career organizations are struggling with getting firefighter, getting people to come in and do the job. And to me, that's unheard of. I told people I'd have cut off the pinky on my left finger to get the job. I was fortunate I got the job when I was 18, but I knew people that had been trying for 10 years to get a job. And, we used to only hire 4 or 5 at a time. Now Montgomery County's got recruit classes of 60 some odd people coming through their recruit class. Every recruit class. Frederick's up to 50. PG, I think, is getting large numbers, but they're not getting the people coming in to test. And I don't know what the answer is.
well, obviously salary is an issue. I mean, I think the benefits of the job are just astounding. You know, the work schedules. Yes, I know, rotating schedules, or 24 on and 48 off, or even worse, 24 40, 24 24. That's It's not conducive to a lot of health issues, but I think it's still far, far better than 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Well, I did 24/48 my entire 34 years in Montgomery County, and that's all I knew. Sleeping at the firehouse. But it's now I'm on day work or flex my hours, but it's finding the people that want to do the job. And like you said, the benefits are phenomenal. We get great health benefits. The pay is pretty good based on what we do. Of course, we tell the public long hours and terrible pay, but in the grand scheme of things, we're getting paid decent money, a good living wage, to do something that we truly love. Actually, I never looked at it as work. I never looked at it as my job. I looked at it as, like you said, having a sleepover with 5 of your best friends. But yeah, I don't know how can we attract people. The volunteer ranks it's even harder, but it's astounding to me that the career side we're having this struggle of getting people to fill out the applications and come in and test. And
Yeah, I can't understand it. I
so
tell everybody that I ever meet, take the test. But
absolutely.
you can
So
only lead the horse to water.
yeah. So we got about 5 minutes left. So I want to talk about your new book. Give you a chance to plug that so people know that you got a new book out there. It's not just the Fire Officer Handbook of Tactics. It's you've got some a new book out now. So go ahead and talk a little bit about that and what it's about.
Well, it's actually about 3 years old now, so not
Your
that
newest
new.
book.
But yeah, it's called Working with Giants. It's kind of a memoir. It's a tribute. Like the title says, I was blessed to work with giants. I mean, these people that I was absolutely, in awe of, and then I got a chance to work with or for them, and the the things that did for my life, I'll never be able to repay. I just got to notice one of my mentors in my first house in the FDNY. I just got his notice for his funeral, and Billy was just an absolutely fantastic guy, as so many of them are, and it was a tribute to all those people who taught me what I know today. Uh, I had a lieutenant who was absolutely critical in shaping my career, and he used to tell me, "Listen to me. I'm going to tell you this, but you got to pass it on to the next guy. And if you don't pass it on to the next guy, I'm going to be disappointed." And you never wanted to disappoint Steve. He was that great of an officer, a great person. And so many of those people that we're blessed to work with, that's what it's about. So it's their story. I tell it from my standpoint because these are things that I experienced. There are 3 stories in there that I didn't personally experience, but I was in the firehouse when they came back from the runs every time. And they were so hilarious that I got to include this because these guys were just astounding in what they did. But it started out as my career. Like I said, starting in 1970, talk about some of the things that I didn't see, and ending up going through 9/11 and the changes in the fire service. So that's really what it's all about.
I can say you have definitely paid it forward with with your writings. Everybody I talk to is like, oh, I got to read Chief Norman's book, for my promotional exam.
I
But just
apologize.
with the information that's in there, it's timeless. And it doesn't matter how old the book is, even the second edition that I have, it's still relevant. And
You got to catch up, Dave. I'm sorry.
I know. Well, when I
There's
see
a
you out
whole
at
chapter on
FDIC,
garden apartment fires.
when I see you out at FDIC in April, I'll get another book. I'll get you to sign that one.
Okay.
But I think you have paid it forward in spades to the next generation that's coming in, because the war years are over. You got to live through that, and the stories that you can tell of the lessons that you've learned. It's you have to have those stories in order to know where we came from, so we can continue to move forward. So I appreciate everything you've done for the fire service, as well as Chief Dunn and Chief Salka, and all the like you said, the giants that have come through the fire service that we learned from. So I appreciate what you've done.
Well, thank you, sir. But
So
I gotta
with
I
that,
gotta give credit, to the department. The FDNY taught me so much of that, and one of the early in the first edition, one of the earliest criticisms somebody in the department, wrote was that, oh, this is just a hardcover version of Ladders 3, meaning that the FDNY already taught all this stuff. Well, it didn't. It didn't. The FDNY's material is meant and aimed at that 6-person ladder company, the 5-person engine company, and so much of the fire service doesn't have those resources. So that was, I thought, my contribution was putting it in the context that, like I said, I worked in a 2-person engine company, and we were it, for a whole county. They'd go out there, and if you need help, we'll try to round up some off-duty guys. So you might get some help in another hour. So I tried to make it make sense, not just for the big cities, but for every community, and make it work for you.
and it did. The lessons that you can pull out of that, it's not rooted in big city stuff. It's stuff that you learn, but how do we do it with 2 and 3 and 4 people on an engine company or a ladder truck?
Yeah. You got to make it work for you.
Absolutely. So, Chief, with that, again, truly honor, and I'm blessed that you had come on the show, took the time to come on the show, and you know, just laying it all out there, and I appreciate that.
All right, sir. Well, like I said, somebody else taught me everything I know, so I'm just passing it along.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about. Well, Chief, take care of yourself, and I
You too,
will
sir.
definitely see you in April.
All righty. God willing.
Absolutely. Have a good day and a
All
good
right.
evening.
You too.